Thank you for joining I Am Possible, which is India's first future tech meets sustainability podcast. And today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Nicolas Vereckee, who's an investor at BITKRAFT Ventures, where he identifies and evaluates new investment opportunities with a particular focus on the intersection of the Metaverse, Web 3.0, blockchain, and games. Prior to joining the BITKRAFT team, Nicolas invested in and built multiple crypto startups and currently also hosts two podcasts, the Metacast and The Wiser Than Yesterday podcast. So, Nicolas, it's a complete pleasure and honor to have you on the show. Why don't we start with a brief introduction, who you are and what do you do?
Quick intro. So I've my first steps into the crypto world, which is currently, my main passion, happened about 5 years ago. I joined a bunch of my friends in a startup where we were doing traditional financial services focused on the crypto industry. So we were a liquidity provider and a market maker firm for centralized and decentralized exchanges. I was writing trading algorithms. So I was the first, algorithm builder back in the day. And this was my first steps into the crypto world. Got really passionate and interested in it since then. And was lucky enough at that point to decide that every extra euro that I had on my paycheck, I would put into Bitcoin and Ether. And in retrospect, that had been a good decision. And so since then, I've become a crypto bro, as they say. I've been fascinated by, the technology and the potential and the opportunities that it brings. Yeah, I decided to look at, the intersection of blockchain and games, where I saw a lot of opportunities. And I'm talking, this was 2020. And since then, I've been just diving into the space. It's one of the reasons I've started my other podcast. It's called the Metacast, and we just talk about the business of gaming and how technology can change, the games we play moving forward. And then last year in 2021, I joined the BITKRAFT team. BITKRAFT, a fantastic, it's the most active gaming VC in the world. They've raised a crypto gaming fund, of which I'm part of the team. So I'm part of the BITKRAFT crypto gaming team. And yeah, so super excited to be here. I haven't thanked you yet, Eddie. I'm honored to be here and speak to you and share any knowledge I can.
Thank you, Nicolas. The pleasure is completely mine. You said that you've got your hands everywhere, right from your trading algorithm to being part of these crypto payment startups, and then, the gaming industry, and now diving into BITKRAFT. And I mean, the journey seems exciting. Why don't we just kind of stay over there and talk about the traditional finance? The traditional finance has taken, it's there from the longest time. It's extremely centralized by nature, but then right now we are kind of poking and peeking into what could be like the decentralized finance. So would you like to kind of unpack that? What is decentralized finance? What does that mean? Or is it just another narrative that we are trying to sell in a new package?
So the way I look at what DeFi or decentralized finance does to traditional finance, I think is the way I look at what this blockchain technology and so Web3 as a whole does to the world we used to know and the internet we used to know. Basically, for me, the Web3 and blockchain technology adds a value layer on top of the internet, which we didn't have. If 10 years ago, or maybe let's say 13 years ago, I sent you an email with a picture, you had that picture and I had that picture too. There was no way to ensure scarcity on the internet without needing to rely on one single party. And so what this blockchain technology does is it allows us to have a value layer on top of the internet where I can send you something and you suddenly have that and I don't. And this basically changes the way the internet works and will work, and all the innovation that will come will completely disrupt everything that we know. And so what happened in the traditional financial space is there's all of these kinds of, like, the finance industry is huge. There's like a super large number of services that are being given to individuals, to companies. Is very, very complex. And at the center of this financial industry are fairly small number of players that actually capture all of the value. I'm talking about very big banks. I'm talking about hedge funds. All of these offer these services, and they're the ones who actually capture all the value that's happening. If you take a loan, for example, to buy a house, and I make a deposit in the bank that you take the loan from, I almost get no interest in return, and you pay quite a lot of interest on your loan. Let's say there's a delta of 2% there. The bank is what captures all of that. So the bank is the intermediary. What Web3 does is Web3 allows us to, do away with all these middlemen, with all these centralized players that capture so much of the value. And so for me, the way I explain this, or the way I think about it, is this technology allows for a more granular dispersion of value. So what can happen now is because of this technology, I could be the one who, like, my money could actually be used by you as your loan. And so instead of having one middle party who captures so much of the value, I get more and you pay less. And so we both capture a bit more of value. And I think this is what this new Web3 technology does. This is what DeFi does. DeFi, looks at what traditional financial players have done in the past, and finds a way to do it using this new blockchain technology, way more efficient, and allows every participant to capture more value, and makes it all more fair and accessible for everyone.
Lovely. Yeah, so I completely buy into the ethos of blockchain, a transparent, open, decentralized world, and everything which can be decentralized, because the entire centralized functioning, be it the governance, the banking industry, to any of the centralized institutions, has its own problems. So the promise of decentralization is super awesome, and I'm completely up for it. But if you see, most of even the blockchain companies are far away from being decentralized. In fact, even Jack Dorsey had put out a tweet, and I'm just going to read out that tweet. He says, "You don't own Web3. The VCs and their LPs do. It will never escape their incentives. It's ultimately a centralized entity with a different label." Would you, since you are an investor, would you like to address that? Because yes, the promise is brilliant, because who wouldn't want to? Because we are finally, at least the narrative is that we're going to break away when we build this new internet, Web 3.0, which we are talking about. When we break away and we say that it's going to be fueled by the creator. We, the creator, it's going to be a participative economy. But how far is that a reality, or is it just a fiction that we are trying to sell?
You touch upon, one of the biggest discussion points within this space quite early in the interview, and it's a great point. I think the reason why. So the point Jack Dorsey makes is that a lot of the protocols that are built within Web3 are built by teams, and these teams usually need to hire people to build what they're doing, and in order for that to happen, they need to have like an initial source of cash, of liquidity, so they can pay wages, and just live before they actually create something that in the end provides value from which they can gather a return. And so that is where the traditional venture investing world comes in. He was saying that Andreessen Horowitz is actually, owns half of Web3, and they're indeed, as is BITKRAFT, we're involved with a lot of projects that are building something which is decentralized, but we're coming in at the start. And so there is, if you look at, the Gini coefficient, is a measure of how unfair or unequal distribution of assets is within one ecosystem. It's often used to look at countries, for example. Gini coefficients of authoritarian regimes are very, I think it's high. So the higher it is, the more centralized, ownership of assets is. The lower it is, the better, the more equal the distribution is. And if you look at the Gini coefficient of a lot of, blockchains, it is very centralized. So there's a small amount of players who own a large amount of the network. And I think the point that Jack Dorsey there makes is that, if that's the case, it's not truly decentralized. And I think it's a fair point. If I was able to choose between a network that is, super distributed and one that is concentrated, I will always choose for the one that is more distributed, more decentralized. But I think the problem there is like there needs to be incentives to fund something and to build something. And so I think at the start, it is often a necessary evil to have some kind of concentration of assets before something significant can be built, right? If you give everyone a bit, you're going to have this strategy of the commons where no one's going to be incentivized to do something because they're hoping that the others will do it. And so I think that this centralization that we see within the Web3 space, where a small number of parties own large parts of the network, is a necessary evil. But in my opinion, that doesn't mean that the promise of Web3 for that reason goes away. I think Bitcoin is highly centralized right now. If you look at the number of wallets that own, there's a large number of Bitcoin that is stuck in a small number of wallets. But that doesn't mean that people within countries where there's super high inflation cannot benefit just from the fact that Bitcoin exists. And so I would say that the equal or unequal distribution of a network does not necessarily make it bad or good in itself. And just to illustrate a bit around the concept of you need some kind of centralization to align incentives in such a way that some things get built. So I don't know if you're into the NFT gaming space, you might have heard from Loot. Loot was a free NFT drop. And the idea of Loot was this was like a NFT, and the goal was for the community to build games on top of this NFT. That is a very short description. We can go into this. I'm super passionate about it, but it's very niche, so we don't have to. Anyway, so Loot, the idea was you distribute this for free, and the community, it's like an experiment, and the community can build what they want on top of it. And what we see is that it's pretty hard to like have one major driving force when things are given away for free, and there's no one centralized entity who has enough incentive to actually start doing stuff. That is, I mean, it's still an experiment, it's still ongoing. I think Loot only has existed for about 6 months now. It's an experiment. We see a lot of people building in the space, but it's slower than what you would have if you had one team who would own, let's say, 20% of the total supply, and 80% would be distributed. Then there's one single entity who can drive things forward. And so yeah, in the end, I think it's all about incentivization of innovation and progress and building. And it's a bit of a for now at least, it seems like it's a necessary evil for progress.
Right. Yeah. So I do completely agree that I think, incentivizing is the only way to drive innovation forward. But, you touched upon NFTs and Loots. I mean, that universal basic income is something like that. We are getting into a world, I mean, not immediate future, but the far out future is a world where more and more decisions are being taken by the machines, because that's we are seeing it already. I mean, it's not even far out future. For example, I'll just give you an example over here. There's a bank in India called ICI. Now they when they give out loans, it was a process, a month-long process where you had to connect with the one who's interested in the loan. The bank customer executive from the bank would go to the customer, take his tax papers, go through it, and it was a back and through process, and it used to take somewhere around maybe close to a month for the loan to get processed. And right now it's being done in 2 minutes flat, because all you need to do is dial up this number, which has got a basic machine learning algorithm built in. The machine learning algorithm kind of opens up your CIBIL report. That's India over here, where it kind of opens up your tax and understands that whether this person is capable of paying or not paying the loan, and basis on that they disburse the loan. Now this for that purpose, the team had maybe around 30, 50 or 100 employees, who would do that in a city like Bombay. Now the entire staff is gone. And I'm just giving you one example. So what I'm trying to say is that in the future, when we have automation where, because I think data is the game changer. Data is the new oil, because the more the data is the truth. We most of our decisions are now being taken by data, and this is 2022 with the rate of acceleration of technology. What happens in 10 years time when we start seeing automation taking over human jobs? What happens in that world? Will capital, money, cryptocurrency play a role over there, or would it be going back to square one, going back to barter?
You touch upon a fantastic point, Eddie, and it's something I think quite a lot about. So the way I see this is, for me, technology is a lever on skill. Back in the day, to work the field, when there were simple tools, there was no tractors or no other farming tools. The best thing you could be is strong and hardworking. And with tooling, or with better tooling, you could probably increase your efficiency by, let's say, 20% maximum, right? If you had slightly better tools than the next guy, you were 20% more efficient. With technology, as technology advances, this lever increases. So now with technology, if you're more capable in, let's say, designing AI algorithms than me, with technology, you can increase your value add by, thousands of times compared to me. And so with technology moving forward, my expectations is that a larger and larger proportion of the human population will not be able to, add value to society anymore in traditional sense, right? As you said, automation. Once we have fully automated fleets of cars and trucks, there's millions of people who do that for a living who are suddenly not going to be able to do that because computers can do it way more cheaply, and so. I think that's a real concern. And I actually think that Web3 might offer a solution there. So you might have heard of the game of Axie Infinity.
Right.
Axie Infinity is a game that is, that became super, super popular in 2021. It is a game that is so-called play to earn. So players that play the game, by playing the game, they earn a certain in-game currency, a token. And they can sell that in-game currency for Ether, which they can then exchange for real money. And so essentially it means that they're playing a game and it's earning them a wage, let's say. And this is like, and as an example, going on, talking about Axie Infinity. So Bill Gates actually reached out to the Axie Infinity team because he also saw the potential of having a UBI, a universal basic income. And so the way I see this moving forward is, I believe that, as more and more people within the world don't have the means or the capabilities to add value to society in a traditional way, I think this will be moved to adding value to work within the metaverse. And so earlier in our discussion, I said that for me, Web3 and blockchain technology adds a layer of value on top of the internet. And it allows participants to capture a bit of the value that they add to the whole thing. And so what I think we'll see in the metaverse, and this could be 5 to 10 to even more years ahead, we'll see worlds where a lot of people spend a lot of time in, and people will basically have jobs within this metaverse. They'll add value to the whole system, the whole game, and they'll be able to capture part of the value that they bring, a significant part of the value that they bring. And I think that will be what they live off at that point.
You are now a part of BITKRAFT Ventures. Would you like to talk about your role over there? And what is it that got you so excited about Metaverse, gaming, and Web 3.0?
So my role within BITKRAFT Ventures is I'm part of the investment team. And so what we do is we we either reach out to entrepreneurs that are building a project that we're interested in, or there's inbound. So people contact us that are looking for funding. And so what we want to do is we want to support entrepreneurs in their journey of, building something that brings massive value to the world. And so, my job is to speak to entrepreneurs, to, think with them through what they're building, and to see if there is a fit for us to invest, to help them with funds. We talked about earlier, if you want to build something, you're going to have to hire people, and give them wages, so they can buy food and pay rent. And so that's something we support with. And so the reason I'm excited is I think what I said, I think if you look back at the today, we spend a significant amount of our time behind screens. This could be our phones. This could be, computer screens. And I think our time spent within digital worlds is only going to increase. Some would say this is a bad thing, right? But I think this is an opportunity. The way I look at it is, within the real world, the real physical world, we are limited by physics, right? We can't run around forever. We can't fly. There's so many limitations put upon us. And I feel like this virtual world has the potential to, remove more limitations and for us to be able to do more things. And I think in general, internet has done bad things, as all new technologies do. People abuse these things. We see a lot of, crypto scams, and we'll see a lot more in the future. This is what happens when you have new technology with bad actors that are able to use it. But I think overall, the invention of the internet was a good thing. And I think building immersive experiences in the metaverse, although it's going to be used for bad by some bad actors, I think overall is going to be, added value to society. I think it's going to add value to people. To give you another example, a lot of people, older people, my parents and my grandparents, they're always very concerned. They're saying, oh, we're going to spend, all day behind computers and hooked up to the internet. And so the way I see, so I think that my children will probably go to school in the metaverse in a way, in a virtual environment. And I think the way this will work is, I think if you can learn something in a virtual environment, it can actually be way more efficient than in the traditional classroom. So for example, let's say history, and this is a very easy example. History, instead of having someone tell you what happened, you can literally live it. You can put on, a VR glasses and you can walk through ancient Rome. You can see the First World War battles and strategies. And that's going to make it so much easier for you to remember this. And so you'll probably be able to learn what you need to learn in half the time, which means that essentially the way I see this is, kids in the future, they will have half of the day where they will spend in, immersive virtual environments where they will learn. And then the rest of the day, they'll be free. The afternoon, they'll be free, and they'll be free to go outside, play, football with their friends. And, I might be super optimistic here, but at least that's how I look at this. And that's what I hope will happen.
Lovely. Yeah, so I'm super excited for the space. I've been invested in virtual reality since 2015. My son is 6 years old. He turns 7 next month. And he's hooked onto virtual reality. He's on my Oculus Quest all the time. Mm-hmm. And he's such a gamer. He's so small, but I'm not a gamer, but he's a complete gamer. And in fact, we moved him from a physical school to a digital school, and this happened because of COVID. But then we realized that, wow, the benefits of the digital school, which is the online school, it's India's first online school, it's humongous. And there are win-wins across. My son does not have to get up early in the morning, get down from the building, go stand at below for the bus. The bus takes around half an hour, 45 minutes to reach the school. The school takes around 5-6 hours, and he comes back and it's the same 1 hour ride back home, and he's tired, shower and goes to sleep. Now he gets up from the bed, jumps right in front of his computer. In a couple of hours, his school is over. He's back onto his VR headset or is doing his stuff, and he's learning continuously. And I think virtual reality is going to play such a huge role in almost all industries, right from your education to healthcare to training, we are kind of like just understanding the possibilities of what's going to do, with once this we free away and break away from this 2D platform, it restricts us and we actually get into the metaverse, web 3.0, AR, VR, MR with the help of 5G, IoTs, blockchain, scanners, AI. I think we getting into such a fantastic world, and I'm super, super excited about this. Would you like to touch upon some of your portfolio companies and possibly their innovations in the space which has caught your attention, what they are doing? Maybe you would like to share with the audience.
We have a bunch of fascinating portfolio companies that are building things from virtual worlds where anyone can create things. I think so. For example, one of the companies we've invested in is a company called Playable Worlds, and what they're doing is they're building, as the name suggests, playable worlds. And I think we've discussed earlier how people will be able to add value within, have a job within the metaverse, sort of say, because they can't do it anymore in the traditional world. And I think being creative is going to be a significant part of that. If you look at what algorithms and artificial intelligence can do today, you see that it's automated jobs, things that are relatively simple, but not be creative. And so I think that's very large amount of non-creative jobs will soon be, as we talked before, driving a truck. You don't have it's not a very creative job. I don't think a lot of people particularly enjoy doing that. And I think that's, user-generated content within the metaverse is going to be very, very significant. And user-generated content means that you are able to add, your little piece to this metaverse. And so this could be I think at some point you'll have this world and you'll have your own space, and within that your own space, you can be free to do whatever you want, and you can, build things, build experiences that others can, come into and enjoy. You can gather your friends, you can play games with your friends, with your family. And I think so user-generated content and how letting people be creative within the metaverse, I think will be, very significant, and it's something I'm very excited for. Then more in the Web3 space, where we're I'm personally very excited about on-chain games. So games that are on-chain are different than, so they differ from games that are not on-chain in the sense that, traditional games, and this is until now, I think almost any game, there's a server, a backend where the game happens. Like if we play a game of, let's say, Call of Duty, where, we try to shoot each other with guns, that's actually is happening on servers of Activision Blizzard. And so these servers are closed off. On-chain games, so games that live on the blockchain, have their backend on the blockchain. And the blockchain, by definition, or not by definition, but most blockchains are public, which means that, the place where the game lives is, accessible for anyone. And so it means that anyone can actually, use the state of the game and do something else with it. And so, I think like playing a shooter game like Call of Duty might be a bad example, but there's a lot of other games where, let's say that you have an RPG like World of Warcraft. If the whole state of the game happens on top of a blockchain, I could level up my character within certain levels on the blockchain from that game. But someone else could actually build another game where I can just take my character with all the relevant skills and items that I've gathered by playing this first game, and I can just go play their game. And so this composability and interoperability is something I'm very excited about. The way I describe this is it's like Legos, every part of a game, for example, where you have your character and how you level up your character. These are Legos that can then be used within other games, and this way you can create a very fast, very big universe that that people can build insane experiences in.
Lovely. As an investor, what is it that you look forward to in a startup?
One thing is drive, right? In the end, you don't really invest in a company, you invest in people. And building a successful startup is one of the hardest things there is. I've done this before. As I said, I've built, I talked about the payment company that we did where we initially focused on, crypto payments. And we had to make a pivot. That stuff is hard. Like I've had nights where I was in my bed and like, what are we doing? What am I trying? This is never going to work. No one wants to pay, with cryptocurrencies. And we then decided to pivot away from this core concept. It was like a total overhaul. We changed the name of the company. We changed the branding of the company. It was almost a new company except for the team. And so that stuff, you can only do that stuff if you really, really believe in a team and believe in your vision and believe in your mission. And so that I think is really key in doing this. So I think in general, and I think this is for every investor out there, at least investors in smaller companies, in startups, the drive of the team is key. What we also look for is the question, if this is, so basically we decide, you want to build this. Does this make sense? This concept, like what you're doing, does this make sense? Will there be demand for this? And then the second question we ask is your team the one that will do this successfully? Because almost every idea is being executed in some way, shape, or form. For example, building virtual worlds where everyone, can add things from their own, and it can, UGC platforms in the same vein as Roblox. There's a lot of companies who are chasing that because I think everyone intuitively knows that this will be a significant part of the metaverse. The question is, are you the one who will be doing this successfully? Because there's a lot of teams out there. Why will you succeed? Then a third question is, and this is more particular to what we are doing right now, is you have a lot of speculation within the crypto gaming space today, right? You have, I think most people have seen the amount of the prices that NFT assets go for, land within the sandbox or some game tokens. I mean, the value of these assets with what they provide utility wise right now is insane. I mean, there's a lot of speculation in the space. And so one question I usually ask is, what's going to be the real value that your game brings? Because in the end, if a lot of games sell themselves as being a play to earn game, which is they're going to say like, oh, you're going to be able to play our game and you're going to be able to make good money from this. But the problem is, if 100% of all of your players come into your game and expect to make a living wage by playing your game, where's that money coming from? Like, where's the money that they are being paid by playing the game? And so there needs to be some kind of value creation within the game. And this is something that I don't necessarily need an answer to immediately, but at least I need the team to have thought about this whole concept. Instead of just saying like, it's always nice to say, everyone's going to be able to make their living inside our game. But my question is, I'm conservative. My question is, there's no such thing as a free lunch. There is no platform where everyone suddenly, makes money and earns a living. There has to be some kind of value creation. Either some other people pay for those initial people to make a living, or there are some other, factors at play. But this is something that I expect that teams think about.
Right. What kind of pitch deck excites you? What do you look forward to the most in a pitch deck? And how open are you towards exploring the opportunity here in India? Because, geography has become history, and that's what Metaverse is doing. And we've got some fantastic startups across the gaming industry. And there's some really unique startups who are doing some really unique things in the Metaverse space. What are your views on that? I mean, because India has a huge opportunity, 1.3 billion people.
We agree. I think as a company, we are super interested in India. I think with the quality of the talent within India and just the massive size of the country and the amount of people there, we've made a number of investments in India and companies that are focused on the Indian markets. And I expect that to continue, in the foreseeable future. So India is something we're super excited about. And then as far as, what am I looking for in a pitch deck? I've talked about, what I'm looking for in a team and in an investment. I think answers to these are important, right? I get a lot of pitch decks where they're trying to first make the case on, why blockchain gaming is going to be very big, and the increase in prices of NFT. So personally, like that stuff, I say these things myself to other people. So you don't have to say, you're preaching to the choir at that point. So that's not something I'm personally looking for. That said, well, it's not wrong that it's in a pitch deck, because there's a lot of generalist VCs out there who don't necessarily, have these insights or these thoughts. So I don't mind that. But for me, I mean, I need to understand what the vision is, who the team is, and then especially why this team is going to be the one to, do this successfully. But that said, for me, a pitch deck is very introductory, and it's more of a kind of a teaser, because everything comes from discussions and conversations. You cannot invest you don't invest in a pitch deck. You invest in people that you speak to, that you have a conversation with. And from these conversations, like you're having with me right now, you're asking good questions. If you ask good questions and they give good answers, then you can move this forward.
So you've been investing in NFTs also, and NFTs, obviously, it's like there's a huge boom. Do we see the old boom and bust cycle, or do you think that NFTs are something which is going to stay and is going to be the base economic layer for the metaverse?
Well, yes, to your second question. Does that mean, so does the fact that NFTs will be the base value layer for the metaverse together with, so NFTs are non-fungible tokens, but so tokens in general, I think, will be the base value layer of the metaverse. And so I'm very convinced that's going to be the case. That said, will this mean that there won't be any cycles? Yes, there will be cycles, right? As we see in any technology, especially when there's potential for speculation, you always see cycles. And I think, what we see today, I think, makes me feel of, and I was still too young to really live it, but the internet, the .com bubble. I feel like we're somewhere before or around that with NFTs. But that said, I think NFTs are a again paradigm shifting technology innovation that will, for example, I think they will have the similar impact on every industry out there as email had, for example, right? Every company uses email in some way, shape, or form. Maybe there's maybe like a farm or something that doesn't. But apart from that, I think NFTs will be similar. Every company, every brand building company will use NFTs. And the thing is, this is such a new technology. And again, it's these Lego blocks, right? NFTs are something like, if someone does something interesting with NFTs, because the code is on chain, it is very easy to, fork what they do and to give your own twist to it. And I think this speed of innovation will make the things that we do with them, like the innovation is going to be crazy, and the speed of innovation is going to be crazy as well. It's almost a full-time job trying to keep up to date with everything that's happening within Web3. And at this point, you almost need to have your own niche to be able to be up to date on all innovation.
Right. You said the speed of innovation. I mean, maybe we could talk a little bit about that, because, technology is growing exponentially, and there are, if you see some of the big tech companies, they're all working in silos, but I mean, just to kind of highlight, why we got to a vaccine so fast, maybe just in 6 months, it was only and only because we all collaborated. Mm-hmm. But if you go to see, I mean, not just the big companies, but all nations are also working in silos. I mean, I could give you examples of China, India, and so many other nations. They are, in fact, curbing trade and imports, but are investing and supporting in internal innovations, entrepreneurs, giving the narrative of self-reliance, that you're creating a country, which is self-reliant. So what are the pros and cons of this isolationist approach? How do we get to a world where we can break the boundaries and make sure that all of these technologies, which is now coming to fruition, how can we actually leverage it, where it is touched to anyone and everyone? I know it's a little too deep a question, but would you like to kind of address that? Is there a route to getting to a place and time in a world where we can build innovation which is for everyone?
I think that's a good question, and I honestly think that The answer to your question is relatively simple. I think we're seeing that happen today. If you look what is happening within, DeFi, for example, DeFi is literally in technology, blockchain-based technology that is replacing the traditional financial system that is open. And so the first, for example, stock exchange variant, DeFi variant was Uniswap. So Uniswap is a protocol on the blockchain that would allow you and me to swap tokens. So for example, if you're selling Ether, I'm selling Bitcoin, like we could, switch those with each other. We can swap those. And so they're replicating or replacing what, for example, a New York Stock Exchange would do. But it's open. So what we see now is there's dozens of decentralized exchanges as they call themselves today. So and it's actually like most of them, or many of them are a fork of one another. So Uniswap was the first one, and then it got forked, and now you have SushiSwap, which is another variant. And so there's hundreds or dozens of these decentralized exchanges that are building on each other. And so because it's all happening on top of a distributed ledger, which is the blockchain, which is open and everyone can look at the code. All of this stuff, the innovation just goes way faster than you would have, as you described, within one country, which tries to keep everything internally. I can understand from a political point of view where you don't want to be fully reliant on other countries, especially if you're a country like China. I can rationally see why people would want that and why country leaders would want that. I live in a tiny country. If we would close our borders, no idea what would happen, but wouldn't be good, right? In Belgium, we have 10 million people. It's nothing. So we are super reliant on trade. So we wouldn't close the border, but I can just see why it makes sense to do it as a very big nation. That said, on the internet, I don't think there's any reason to close the borders. And I think everyone will benefit from keeping the borders open, keeping innovation open, letting things move forward faster. I think that's all a good thing.
Right. You also host two podcasts, the Metacast and the Wiser Than Yesterday podcast. I mean, what was it that urged you to get into the podcast and do talk about your podcast?
So my first podcast that I launched is now a bit more than 2 years ago, is the Wiser Than Yesterday podcast. It's basically me and a friend who were very much into book reading. So we read a lot of books, and we think, reading. So I've learned more in the 5 years after my university studies than I did during my 5 years of university studies, because I read so many books. And why we decided to make a podcast of it, we just decided, okay, we're going to read a book and then we're going to discuss it together and we're going to do this in public. And so now every time I read a book for the podcast, I don't read it to learn. I read it to be able to explain in public, which is a huge shift. It sounds like it's small, but it's completely it changed the way I consume content. And it made me think about okay, I heard this is interesting. How would I explain this myself? And so it's just like a life hack. I would recommend this to anyone. Try to, instead of reading things or learning things to learn things to be able to explain them to someone else. Is going to drastically change the way you learn these things. And it's going to be a huge boon for the way the speed at which you learn and what you remember from what you read or consume content wise. And so I mean, I've really enjoyed doing that, and I think learning in public because of that reason is a superpower, right? You're forcing yourself to take stuff seriously, right? If you're gonna explain something publicly, I mean, you can go back and listen to some of the podcasts that we did, and it's not going to be the best. I'm not going to lie. We put some pretty bad episodes out there. We read some books on ancient philosophy that were way over our head, and we didn't understand it all, but at least we had fun doing it. I'm not ashamed of what I did. And I still took away, some things from this. But in general, I think, learning in public is a superpower. Sharing learnings with the world is good. I mean, I wouldn't be on this podcast if I haven't done podcasts myself, because I host a podcast about the business of games and talk about everything I'm interested in. It allows me to, create a name for myself, get a personal brand. Additionally, because of that, let's say I'm interested in a certain topic. At this point, I have the, capacity, the ability to reach out to someone who knows a lot about that topic and just ask him like, yo, I want to talk about this. You want to join me on the podcast? It's a bit like you, Eddie. You know, if you didn't do a podcast, I might not want to put the time into like having a conversation with you, but because this goes public, and we can share this with the world, it's way easier to get people on the podcast and speak to them.
Lovely. Yeah, I guess I do the same. I mean, the things because of the same reason. So I've been a college dropout and I was miserable with my studies. So my entire background is the creative space. I used to play for a rock band. I used to produce content. I've created music for a couple of Bollywood feature films. So education was nowhere in my field of view. But then maybe around 6 years back, I discovered virtual reality and I started reading. And I have whatever I've learned is from the internet. I keep on learning, and I've learned from having these interactions with people such as yourself, and where I push myself to kind of be brave and also to be stupid to ask questions. And I believe that it's only when you're brave enough to ask stupid questions you learn more. So yes, I think you put it out so beautifully that reading and if you learn to explain, if you are able to explain things, you retain it more. And I think sharing is the core. When you share your learning, you kind of grow as an individual. And I would also encourage others to kind of do something like that, because that's the best way to understand more about life and what you do. So you mentioned that you read a lot, so would you like to kind of suggest a couple of books that which I think I or the audience can go through, and maybe some content or courses for understanding Web3 or Metaverse better?
Yeah, happy to. I think so I have two books that I recommend anyone that asks me like, okay, what book should I read? And I think the first one ties into what we discussed a bit earlier on this podcast, where, because like with the metaverse, we're going to have an infinite amount of entertainment at our fingertips. And as humans, we're actually not evolved well to handle these types of things. We're not like, modern technology is being abused to make us addicted. To give an example, if I open a bag of chips, that bag of chips gets eaten completely. I cannot stop myself from eating that stuff. And that is because millions of dollars have gone into designing the chips in such a way that they speak to my brain. And similar thing happens with, drugs, recreational drugs, also entertainment, everything that Facebook and social media does, it gives you these endorphins into your head every time you get a notification. And so I think being able to handle this moving forward is going to be key. Technology and companies are going to get better and better at knowing what makes you tick. And, making it so that they live your life, right? You're going to be constantly, thinking about, okay, I just tweeted this, how many notifications or how many likes did I get? And I think a superpower in avoiding this is meditation. And so that's why my primary book that I recommend to people is called Why Buddhism is True. It is a really, really, really good read. And I think it's, for happiness, the one book that I would recommend to anyone. It's well written, it's fun to read, and it really convinced me that, being able to control your mind is one of the most important things you can do. So yeah, I think that's number one. And then the book, and this is actually not one book, it's a series, and it's a series by Nassim Taleb. He wrote the Encerto series. So I think the first book is Fooled by Randomness. Then you have the Black Swan. So it's 5 books. And these books I almost think about these books every day when I'm making investment decisions, when I'm making, other decisions. They even influence the way I think about nutrition. I'm big into health myself. And so these books, anti-fragility, that concept is phenomenal, foundational. And I would recommend anyone to read these books. These 5 books together, you don't need to read the middle one because it's not really a book. So there's 4 books that I would recommend reading. It's a lot, but totally worth it. And also, Taleb can be a bit of a douchebag. So he's not, the nicest guy. He's not very humble, but he's brilliant. And just like, don't follow him on Twitter. He's really like an asshole on Twitter. So don't follow him on Twitter. Just read his books. He's a smart guy. He's not a nice guy. He's a smart guy, and he wrote good books. And then apart from that, I recently thought about what book would I give to myself when I was 18? And so if it's not one of the books that I just said, so either Incerto or Why Buddhism is True, I would suggest The Almanac by Naval Ravikant. So Naval Ravikant, in my opinion, is one of the wisest people alive today. He's the founder of AngelList. He's brilliant. He does a bunch of podcast appearances on, the Joe Rogan podcast on Tim Ferriss, and that man is absolute treasure of wisdom. And someone took everything that he said publicly, all of his tweets, put it into a book. It's called The Almanac by Naval Ravikant, or the Navalmanac. And again, it's a short book, and it's absolutely insanely brilliant. The amount of it's like a gold mine of wisdom. And if I was 18, I would give myself that, tell myself, read that book and think about everything in that book, because all of that is brilliant. So, yeah.
Where and how can my listeners reach out to you?
I think the easiest would probably be Twitter. So I'm at Nico, Nico Vereecke, Vereecke. No worries if you cannot pronounce that. You can at least type it. You can find me there. You can also find me on LinkedIn, but Twitter is probably the best way to reach me. What
are you excited for this decade, and possibly your personal moonshot?
I'm a positivist. Otherwise, again, like I've said this, if you're not, positive, if you don't look at the future in a positive light, you don't become like a venture investor. Right? Our job requires that we're excited about the future. And so in general, I think I'm excited about what technology will do for us. I've described the world where, kids would only need half a day in an immersive educational environment and can be free to do whatever they want in the remainder of the day. That is stuff that I'm excited about. And then, personal moonshot wise, I guess I try to focus on like I know this sounds really douchebaggy, but I try to not think about goals. I try to make sure that I'm in a good, steady state of, I'm happy with I am. I'm happy with the progress I'm making, and just, look one day at a time ahead, and and just, be a little bit better every day. But I mean, personal moonshot, in 10 years, I'm hoping that will have, a pair of kids, and that the world that my kids live in will be, slightly better, maybe a bit thanks to my efforts as well.
Lovely. Nicolas, thank you for being part of the podcast. And you said it so profoundly. I think, yes, we need to have these lofty goals, but I guess, the only thing that we have is our current time. And I think we need to respect that and live it completely, enjoy the moment and build for today. In fact, just in the morning, I was having a conversation with my wife, and I was saying that the only thing that we have is right now. And we always lose it out by either being depressed of the past hang-ups, or not, how are we going to handle the future? And so we completely miss out the present. So I think, it's so important to kind of live in today, obviously work, do your best, give it your 24 hours, because this is such an awesome, your biology, the world is super awesome, and we've got so much opportunities, because of the internet, Web 3.0. I can connect with you. Who would have thought that I would be able to have a conversation with an investor, me sitting in India? But this is what the internet does. I think so. You need to push beyond your limit, and I think everything is possible. And I guess that's the reason my podcast is called I Am Possible, and that's what I preach, because I think today we live in a world of endless possibility. The only thing that stops us is our desire intent. So really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you, Nicolas. Really appreciate this.